Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Digital Services Forum biweekly call. Today, we're going to go over foundational data. It's something that we've been kicking around for a while, and finally, we have a meeting about it. I think we've been talking about this one for about a year and a half. So today, we're just going to go through and talk about some of the challenges. We have some speakers today that are going to share some pieces of that as we go through. For those of you for the first time, if you're here, we always like to have a very active chat on the meeting. A lot of times the chat is very valuable when we go back and we go through it because we're able to see what we do next time and learn more about the challenges that you're facing so that we can bring up relevant topics. If it is your first time, please just drop your name in there. Let us know where you're from and the other members can welcome you in. So get right into the agenda today. Is Alan on? You here yet, Alan?
Alan's on.
How are you, sir? All right, how about Etta?
Yes.
Hi, Etta. And Craig? And Donna. All right, I think we got 2 out of 4. So we'll go ahead and get started. What we're going to do just to get the conversation started is we're going to go through, and we had a very active conversation for 30 minutes where everybody had a lot of thoughts on things, and it seemed to gravitate. We talked. It seemed to gravitate towards locations. So we're going to start out at a high level and just make sure that everybody has the right understanding of foundational data. And at least if we have a shared understanding of what that foundational data is and isn't. And then we'll talk about some of the different sources. And then we'll go into more of a deep dive on location. And so if we look at the common service data model, the obvious place to start being a lot of people are familiar with that on this call. The 8 on the left-hand side are what we thought we'd start out with. So locations, right in the middle of the page here, that was a big area of concern. Yeah, you know, we'll talk about some specific areas there, but that is one class of foundational data. There were the groups of people, how we're creating these in ServiceNow. So whether they're assignment groups, resource groups, you know, other groups of people that we're using to manage either routing work to pull from a pool of people for resources. There's the org structure, and then the 3 they have here: company, business unit, and department. But I also threw cost center in there. I know that one's a little bit different, and that's used across all of the different objects as well, depending on what you're doing. I know a lot of people are focused on the life cycles and making sure those life cycles can proliferate across all the different objects that are being managed. Business process, and I put value streams. I just grouped value streams in here because those are something that's on the platform now. Everybody can use them. I don't know if they'll end up with the foundational data or end up separate from the foundational data. But I think they'll end up down here eventually, or maybe we should just consider them down here. Product models, a lot of those we've been talking about, whether they're the hardware models, software models, service models, all those different models are that's another big piece of the foundational data. And then CMDB groups, right? So if you're grouping chunks of CIs together, whether they're all the Linux boxes or Windows boxes or something very specific with a naming convention, the way that we can have those groups, that's also foundational data because those groups can be used across everything up here. So Alan or Ed, I don't know if you had any more comments or any other things that you would consider in the foundational data groups, or what do you think of that list to start out with?
Oh, I think it's a great.
Go ahead,
I think it's a really great list.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Anything big time missing on it that you would?
Number
No,
6.
when I
go
ahead.
sorry.
You go ahead.
What's going to be interesting on number 6, because we won't be able to have a full conversation today, but how those business processes connect to those value streams is going to be important. And so that one is going to need a separate, I think, a separate session. I mean, to talk about it, we're just in the process of building out the value streams, but your value streams are going to cross map to your business capabilities. And then it's in your business capabilities that you come down to how, right? So then you can bring back in your business process. And that connection it's almost there.
So it might be its own thing, is what you're thinking.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. With examples. I think a lot of these on number 6 will come with an example. We can even use ServiceNow.
Okay.
I think that's going to be helpful. I've been hearing that feedback. It's like we give all this theory and people want some examples. I said, okay. But you always do a really good job of giving examples.
Yeah, we had a value stream meeting a couple of weeks ago. We talked about using the existing models, but I know there's a lot of changes coming in there. So that should be one we revisit again pretty soon. Alan, anything on your side?
No, it's a good list, but I see a pretty clear separation between 1 to 4 and 5 to 8. That I look at 1 to 4, and that's really, and to me, that really says the data that we use day in, day out. And 5 to 8, it really seems to me to be another level. And echoing Etta's comments, that understanding the relationship between process and service and product and capability. The distinction between those isn't clearly understood, at least not by me and our in our organization. So that whole realm seems to be, to me, to be a layer on top of that, but the real foundational data I see is in 1 to 4.
Okay.
That's just my opinion.
I like that. Any other comments just on the list? I'm going to actually put up a poll here too, so that we can collect some data on this and make sure that we get the stuff that's really important. Based on that answer, I know what Alan's are going to be, but yeah, I guess I just want to do a real basic poll here, which is 3 levels of importance, so that we can see what everybody's thinking. And then I left a second open question. If there's anything that we're missing on number 2, it's just kind of a wide open, are there some things there that are missing? So this way we can order these on the group's importance and see where we land, and kind of post that on our forum, so that we can make sure that subsequent things are prioritized based on that list. All right, and I will get any extras on here if I see a pattern and things that we missed on the call. I'll definitely add those to the list as we go and mention that in the forum. Anybody else have any comments on this before we go on? All right, so that will be the foundation data, at least the foundation we start with. Before, yeah, definitely CSDM V5 is going to be a big topic. I'm looking on there, and we will look at some examples today when we go in on, especially in locations, because based on our conversation, we're thinking, man, we got to zoom in on something, because locations took us a whole 30 minutes on our planning calls. But today we'll look at locations, and then based on priority, we'll maybe look at 1 or 2 others that we could pick up on, like a part 2 of these meetings. All right, let's go down to the next one, and then I'll introduce this topic, and then we'll share the polls. So some examples. I know everybody was going to be asking for some examples. So what I'll do here is get rid of that one first. If you look at the base tables for CMN location, right, this is a lot of this is what we're using today for location. So if you ever went into the schema map inside ServiceNow, never click on reference tables with this because it's referenced almost everywhere, the location. And that's why it's foundational data, right? So when I build the schema out for this, you know, I don't want to show the list of reference tables. So when you look at the way that these are all attached in as part of the company table, the life cycle data, right? The group, all of those are things that are using the location. I'm going to show you how I got there. So if you need to look at it in your environment, you can do the same. And so when you go into the table in ServiceNow, you can, oh, I got to log in again. You can go ahead and see your different tables, and you could use those. You can use the schema browser to look at how those tables are used or extended. And that helps you sometimes understand the data models. So this one is the one, if we start with the location table, I can focus on this table. And you can see that the location table is extended by workplace location. So that's why I said, click on this referencing tables because there's a lot of them there. But referenced tables are ones that I could add. And then you'll see that these are all tables that reference the location table. So you can have a little bit more of an understanding of the data model, and then even see which different columns that they would bring in. Now, the workplace location table, this is just to go, this is to show a standard extension of the location. I don't want to say that you have to have workplace location, right? But this is a good example of how people usually use location. So what they'll do is they'll take location and they'll extend it. And that's what we do when you install our workplace service delivery, is we extend the location table and we create things like sites, floors, buildings, right? So this way it's not a geographic location anymore with an address on it, but now it's some space inside a building or some specific floor in the building. So this is usually how we're going to see an extension of that location piece. So there's the core data that you're going to get that's just addresses and places, but then the different ways that you nest these can help you, you know, make that data more useful or not. Right, so I'm going to hand it over to Alan and Etta. And I know you had a lot of thoughts on this as we went through.
Alan.
Do you want to go first, Etta?
Just a small comment on this. Because of the extension from the workplace location, I'm just going to use a healthcare provider as an example. Just so happens Alan's from one as well. Sometimes it's really important to know the area. And so being able to identify the floor and the region and the area of not only where the person is sometimes the doctor might be at one hospital one day in a location and they have some kind of ticket in. The other thing too, also when we start doing assets, you've got to know that it's on this floor in this corner, right? Mm-hmm. So that was getting this mapped out against what you currently have. You need to know those gaps ahead of time.
Now, did you build these out at any of your customers? Because I know you visit a lot of customers, right?
Yeah.
Have you built this model out?
Only as demo data to show examples. And what we were getting ready for was to do clinical assets. And we needed to know where the asset was.
Okay. And then does this data come from any other system? Like, would you get some of the data from AD or HR, GIS, or was ServiceNow its own system of record for ServiceNow locations?
No, ServiceNow, we never use ServiceNow as the source location. Okay. It's either going to be their ERP system, SAP, Workday, whoever else is doing that these days, which just seems like everybody, right? We try to get the data from there. on this, what's interesting on this core data, there are some areas that you just don't want ServiceNow to be the source data of, because who's going to maintain it? And then it gets out of sync from its real source.
Yeah.
So what I always try to do is to say, if you were to send a check out to someone, where would that be? And so that's really the main, like, primary location that I would start with, and then start to add in the rest of the information. But it gets tricky, and you're asking a bunch of questions. Alan?
Thanks. Our challenges come from, well, first, one premise is that our systems of record for location, I'm at Kaiser Permanente Healthcare that has locations in Northern Southern California, Oregon and Washington, Georgia, Mid-Atlantic, so multiple national regions. And those began as separate entities, locally managed. And so they grew up each managing their own, establishing their own system of record. In terms of facilities, there are multiple external systems of record for location data. One uses the tool Archibus, others use other ones. And so there are multiple feeds that come in, and they need to be reconciled and normalized so that we've got consistent location data, across the organization. It's often challenging to get the owners of those systems to appreciate the need for standardization. Oh, we're fine. We've been using this forever. Why do we have to change? But then if we morph it and normalize it as part of import, then we own that data mod, and have to keep that up to date. So there are some sources that take things all the way down to the room, which is really important for clinical equipment, to be able to identify, not just where is this incident, but where in the building is this incident, is the failure.
Yep.
Now, the other thing that's not so much about the data, but about how we use it, is distinguishing technical location from user location. So when an application fails, it may fail in a data center, in location one, but and which users are impacted. That's, it could affect the users in Northwest. The users in Georgia may be unaffected. So that's more about use of it. But I'd say that our primary challenge in location is aggregating, standardizing the data from the multiple systems of record.
Yeah. And then adding some of your own, it sounds like, too, right? Like you're going to have some ServiceNow specific stuff that you then become responsible for.
We haven't gone there yet. I hope we don't have to. So we're still trying to be persuasive.
Okay. Right. Does anybody, if you could post in comments, if you don't want to come off mute or come off mute, does anybody use a GIS system for this type of data and use it as a system of record? I've been doing a lot of work because I'm in government. I do a lot of work with Esri, but I didn't know if other people are starting to mash the Esri data and the ServiceNow data. The GIS stands for Geographical Information Systems, and in government and utilities, that's a big thing. Is make sure there's different areas you can draw and say that this is part of a data center or part of a property. So there's different shapes you can define and things like that. So it gets pretty complicated in that area. There's also these things called linear assets, like a highway is a linear asset, and then which means that there's highway section 101 mile marker 101.1, 101.2. So what it does is it's a continuous asset, but it breaks them up into sections. And then there's a graphical definition for each of those sections, or like a sprinkler pipe or a gas pipe in a building, right? That could be a linear asset so that you can dispatch people. So that's coming up in our enterprise asset management section a lot. That's a big part of a GIS system too.
Hey, John.
Hey, Richard.
Hey, just as a comment, right? We're challenged with the fact that we have security,
Okay.
right? And so if somebody has a code or something that goes out and they need to respond to a location, so they maintain their locations. And then you got facilities. Well, every room's got a barcode above it, but that's always behind, right? It's never current. Then you've got the insurance division because they own property, and every piece of property has to have all of that information. So we have all these multiple databases, and the biggest challenge is who wins, right?
Yeah.
Right, and trying to take all those multiple sources and aggregate those into ServiceNow. Then what becomes the right data? Everybody's ignoring it because it's such a large challenge to overcome. It's a giant resource suck, and we're just ignoring it. Because it's such a big problem to undertake, because it's not just it's not just for IT to solve, right? It's a business problem, and it's a challenge, and it screws everything up. So
Yeah, I've seen some where that number 2 on here is transient data. We've been talking about that both with assets, where there's assets in other systems, but ServiceNow needs to do some work on them, but also with locations. So if we're coming in and let's say you have customer locations in there and there's tens of thousands of customers, do we want to keep every single address that we ever have in the ServiceNow database? Or do we only want it to be available, let's say, when it's attached to work, or when a work item for a specific address hasn't been touched in 6 months? Do we kind of purge out that, do some trimming on the address table inside ServiceNow? So there's been a lot of discussions about that. Is we get addresses in from other systems, and that's fine, because on a record producer, you can call out to your security system or your facility system, right? If it's a facilities case, you can use their addresses, put them in ServiceNow when you need them, and then dump them when you don't need them anymore. So that's been another topic that's been coming up in data as well. Anybody else have anything on this one? And Richard, have you made any headway? I know you guys were working on this internally, foundation data in general, not just ServiceNow foundation data.
yeah, we've made quite a bit of progress. But it's slow going, right? I think we've spent the last 6 months at your recommendation and others' recommendation, just showing everybody the value, why we really need this, right? So that when we come to you and we have questions and we're trying to gather the data to have it so you can realize that value and that it's there for your purposes, not, I could care less whether it's there or not, right?
Yep.
And that's been going very well. So it used to be we were met with pitchforks, now we're met with, with a sandwich. So
Good deal.
I like that transition. Pitchfork to sandwich. Yeah.
All right, I'll show you one more example on here. Etta said I'd like to show examples. So what I did, I have a YouTube video for this on my channel, and it's actually linked in here. But I'll just show you one screen on this for now. What you could do in ServiceNow, right, is we could build these little custom apps. So this is the ID in ServiceNow for building a custom app. And what I did in here was pretty simple, but it was useful for a customer, where I have these 5 different tables. And what I did in these 5 different tables is they all extend location. So what was more important for this person, because it was a warehouse, they had a warehouse, it was an evidence warehouse for a public safety organization. So what they did is we built basically the same model in an application, right? I built the same model that they have done here with our workplace service delivery, where it extends location and then creates these things like a building that has an address, but the space is a space that's in a building, but it's in a floor in a building, right? So you can nest these and you can create context for each of the different areas that come in. So this one that I created was for a warehouse. So it's basically saying, where is, it's one of our 7 warehouses, and then what aisle is it in, what aisle level, right? So there's different levels where you stack them like bins, or the bins are the actual locations within the level. And then there's actually some of the things we have to circle zones. You could say like all these widgets are in zone A and all these widgets are in zone B. So a zone is like an arbitrary grouping of aisles or bins or levels. So this was, I had some good comments on YouTube, and there's a link in here where I give you the code for this. If anybody wanted to pull down the app and have an example of how you can build your own extension to the data model that's inside of, I don't want to go there, right? But it'll link out for you when you're in that PowerPoint that I always share for you. So I'll put this link in there so that you have it. And then you'll see just an example of how you can build your own versus using one of the ones that comes with one of the ServiceNow plugins.
So John, do you map those to the WSD structure then?
So these are still location. So these are in the CMN location table.
Okay.
But it's just a different nesting. So you could actually use them in this structure if you wanted to, or in some cases, this might override the structure. So if you have a warehouse as a site, you can even extend that site in the warehouse. I didn't do that because this customer didn't have workplace service delivery.
Oh, okay.
But it's something you could stack onto it, right? You could say, here's a specific definition for a warehouse.
The reason I ask is I've seen all those types in the space table.
Okay. Yeah. So the space has different definitions in there.
Yes.
I didn't know that. So I'll have to go check that out.
Last comment on location. The approach that we're trying to take in order to motivate change, specifically motivate the creation of a program and funding to affect change in the completeness and quality of the location data, is to try to quantify the cost of using the poor data, the cost of missing data, of wrong data, and it's easy to say and harder to do, but that's the approach that we're taking to try to motivate the owners of these external systems to come to the table and make some progress on this.
Yeah, good point. Everything comes down to the cost, right? The cost to maintain versus the cost to doing it wrong. Yeah.
Right. John, on your example there, maybe this is going too deep, but that's just the data. Would there be some sort of a scanning app for them to assign something to a bin? I can imagine maintaining those 4 levels manually, wouldn't last very long.
Yeah, and they already had that. They already had these things set up, and that's why I backed into their scanner, like what they were scanning in on how they were coding the bins.
Good.
Yep. So I had to back into their model and then just make ServiceNow's model match with what they had. Yeah. All right, I'll ask you guys for some comments on this. This is my first time seeing it too, but I'll share the results of this, but I also will share the results on I'll share them on our channel as well. So from this, it seems like locations is definitely one of the big ones. Users is the biggest. So users is interesting because anybody who checked users, some of the big concerns I see is that we're getting users from Active Directory, but then we're augmenting that user data with data from an HR system, maybe a facility system. So what are some of the challenges around users, if you can either put them in chat or come off chat? That seems like the most important one on the list, right? So what do you guys think, Etta?
Well, I'll start in here. I'd say the big areas that we struggle with in users, and it's users in groups, sort of looking at those together. With users, it's about active and inactive users, because we get a feed from the HR system that says, oh, this user is no longer in the company. They've left. The user record becomes inactive. What does that do to groups? If suddenly you've got a group with an inactive manager, then you effectively don't have a manager. Or if you've got a group with no active members, it's not functional. So one is keeping things healthy in groups, that the group has an active manager and at least one active member. Another dimension of that is when participation in a group requires a skill. If the user doesn't have the required skill, then effectively it's not a functional group. And so we want to get to the point where, similar to CMDB Health, we've got things in place that will be monitoring that continuously, probably daily, so that when there's an anomaly, a notification goes to a person, and correction is made. The other big area about users is licensing, idle business stakeholder or something like that, because that's a key driver of cost. And so if there's somebody who is only doing transactions every quarter or every 6 months, do they need an idle license daily? And so we've had a number of cases where there's been automatic reclamation, and then when the user goes to do something, they're blocked, and so it has to be remediated in real time, and that slows down business processes. So it's I'd say our issues are dealing with keeping things whole as users come and go, and then also the issue of licensing.
Okay. So when I'm working with a customer and we start talking about the groups and the users, I actually come in with a playbook to see if that's a really good starting point. And here's why. So, on the platform, we have different types of work. And if you're in a group that works on incidents, you work on catalog items, you work on, projects or stories, and you want to do resource capacity planning, I've got to get the groups right, because you can't be in multiple groups. You've got to have a primary group. And then I want to be able to then use some of the new attributes against those users. And then you're going to align that, because when they do their time cards, you're doing financials. So I come in with a playbook to see what do they have existing, and to see if I can map it in. And if not, to find out why.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we don't get that alignment right on the work types, the type of work that they do, the skill set, when they go to do their time cards, it doesn't flow.
Got it. All right. Anybody else have comments? If you want to come off mute. I don't know if Donna and Craig ever came in. Are you guys on there?
Let's see. Yeah, I'm in here.
Hi. We're just taking comments from the group, so if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I just hopped on, so I'm not sure what was reviewed already.
We went through, and this is the priorities that I have on the screen right now. of everybody, like from extremely important, it looks like the most important thing to everybody is users, followed by groups, and then locations on the importance scale.
John, I put it in the chat, but our challenge is as people leave the company or move roles, we're relying on people to manually maintain the user's information and the configuration items that they own. So that's been a huge challenge for us. Is we want to try to automate that without having to have manual intervention from folks.
Oh, Laura, isn't
I
that
don't
a
know if there's good
nightmare? I
examples.
feel you.
Yeah.
I feel your pain.
I don't know if there's examples you can provide us for where folks have been successful for that or not, or if there's integrations we can do better within Workday or what we should do.
Yeah, there is, and we've had a lot of conversations on this, especially on onboarding and offboarding, because a lot of times what will happen is they'll try to bring in a new person, and then they'll say, "Oh, that's an inactive directory already." And it's so all of the different systems have different retention policies, and so they might try to do a rehire, and they say, "Oh, we don't have this user yet over here, but Workday has it, right?" Or Workday doesn't have it, and AD has it. So there's all these conflicts when you're trying to, especially when you're trying to bring people back. So we had a lot of people that they had furlough programs, and then they bring those people back in, and they want to do a continuation of employment. So there's all those edge cases too that make it really challenging. But we do have some good examples there. I think that would be a good topic in itself, is to talk about those users.
Using IRE with users and groups may also be a good idea. One of the challenges we have here is duplication. And there's manual ways to go through that, or there's automated ways to go through that. But IRE is a really useful tool there.
You use that today, Craig?
We're in the process of setting that up.
Oh, that'd be a really interesting topic to hear more about.
Yeah, it'd be really cool to see, oh, here's this user and they have this value. Where did it come from? Oh, it came from the second level feed, or it came from the first level feed. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, we have a similar confusion with Workday and AD, where attributes can get mixed up and cause duplication.
Is there anybody that feels like they got a really good handle on this, on the
Yes.
I won't say it's a great handle, but we require groups rather than users, because we've ran across that same problem of trying to manage a individual user and how often they change. So we require groups, and any member of that group can, has the authority to make changes to it. But this way, we always have someone responsible for that CI.
And Lou, you're saying, thank you. That's awesome. I mean, the policy, I think, is the big thing.
Yes.
And where's that
John.
recorded? Is that recorded in like managed by group?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yes, sir.
Managed by group is the group that is supposed to be the group that is responsible for the CI. It's not the group that supports the
Yeah, that's the
object.
inside. Outside the orange.
Somebody else not on mute, John.
Need to go on
the
mute,
one.
yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Did you catch that? Yeah, so the managed by group is the group that is responsible for the CI or the CI class. And the support group, if you're talking about incident, because I think the underlying value is still assignment group when they relabeled it as support group. Or no, I think it is now support group on incident. The underlying value on change is the change group, but it's the underlying value is assignment group. In any case, that is the group that you tie if you want. When you create an incident, you select an app service and you say, okay, every time that app service is selected, then assign it to this group. That group then basically is supporting that server or that computer. But the managed by group, as the gentleman before me just said, that's the group that's responsible for the CI class or anything in the ServiceNow where the data or structure of that particular CI is incorrect. They work on that from that perspective, but they're not the same people that support, rebooting the server or whatever. That's how ServiceNow designed it.
Now, all your groups, I guess this is a general question too, but in your situation, are all your groups coming from AD or your LDAP, or is it or you're
Yes.
defined in ServiceNow?
No, they all come from 80. We require them to be 80 groups.
That's nice. Yeah, because then you don't have to maintain them, right? You just
Bingo.
yeah. I think that's the big thing. If you find the good system of record somewhere else, like in the facility system, as mentioned earlier, a security system, but hopefully you got a good AD team, and that's you could just add a new group in and then make sure that you're using one of those. And if the new one needs to be created, you go to the AD team and it syncs to ServiceNow, right?
So I'd be interested in understanding the distinction there, because you can have AD groups that grant access to a particular application. So for example, this group, you'd let you into the house, and this other group also lets you into the same house, but then you can get into the bedroom, but the other group only lets you into the living room, right? So those people that are in those AD groups can get access into that house. Well, that house or that group could be the subscribed by group of the offering, right, in ServiceNow through an integration with AD. So
Yep.
now you basically know exactly that business app consumes that app service that offering depends on. That offering subscribed by group has that AD group, and there are all the members of the group. So you now know when you have an outage, you can basically send to all the different groups that have the different members. You know how many exactly that rolls up to, say 150 different people have access to that application. Boom, the outage goes out, the notification gets sent to all of those 150 people as it simultaneously gets posted to the employee center outage, system status page.
I'm thinking about the work groups too, right? The pillar groups, like when you give somebody that AD privilege, it automatically gives them a ServiceNow role so that they can close tickets, right, for that assignment group.
Right, so that's the other side that I said, the differentiator. So the one side is you're managing at the offering level, those AD groups for the reasons I just explained, but the other side is the other person was saying that they're pulling the AD groups, and those AD groups are being applied, for example, to that specific app service CI, or maybe it's the infrastructure, because we know you don't want the business app as the CI on an incident. And then basically when that CI is selected, it automatically associates the group, they get the ticket.
Yeah. Or for a project too, I guess that's assignment wise, right? That would be probably the group that's closing tickets would be similar. Or Etta, I don't know if they're different, like you do the SPM stuff a lot.
Right. I always want them to be the same because I want to do resource capacity planning. And so if I've got you across multiple groups, it's hard to do that. Even if you do an operational plan for your unplanned work incident, it's better to have everybody in the same group than use the attributes that are within the group and the new things coming in with resource assignment to get specific.
Okay.
The next thing you would say, Etta, is then you would make that group an agile group. So then you can also use it against the application model that's associated to the business app for your agile board and your defects, enhancements, user stories.
Bam, you got it.
I know you.
It all ties together.
All right. So I guess the magic there is if you do have good external systems for users and groups, it becomes a kind of a non-issue, right? You just have to know for the few orgs that have that. But it sounds like a lot of people are having to do that on their own.
Yeah, it kind of falls in the boat that we've had similar experiences, whether it's really that external source, how well is that managed? What is, how does that look coming into ServiceNow? Where ServiceNow, has a well-defined organizational structure following the CSDM framework, and we've got a good model here to define. It's just how do we plug that in with that external source and make sure that it, everything is smooth rolling. It's been tough.
And what would be you have a couple external sources, Donna, or you have?
We have AD and PeopleSoft.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be interesting. That IRE example that I heard, that'd be really interesting to see that coming in through there.
Yeah, and a lot of times from our PeopleSoft, it's both users and locations, and AD does the users that are on the locations piece. It's more it was designed for procurement and supply chain, not necessarily ITSM support. So there's a little bit of manual work in the location space to bridge that gap, but there's definitely opportunities. We definitely have opportunities.
To clean it up. Okay.
Mhm.
Any other comments? Anybody else want to come off mute and add anything? So AD groups is sync with the assignment groups and
Hey, John, this is Mitch. Yeah, I mean, just post a comment like higher ed, I see Celissa and some of my other colleagues are on the call. Because we have quite a few personas that can make up our user base, we have several sources of user sort of information from Active Directory for employees and, student information systems for students, right? PeopleSoft for, maybe external entities that, consult with us or CRM systems and things like that. So, I think the trick for us is trying to align the out of the box groupings like IT department or business unit department. And those lists for us often have to be manually maintained. So we struggle with that because we want to make sure that for reporting purposes, for example, we can create a gazillion assignment groups, right? But we want them to map up to a director or a leader within a particular vertical in our organization, right? So we struggle with that, and I think other people may struggle with that as well. So,
Well, when you do that through the user record, so that user belongs to this department.
well, we don't really know what department, right? Because department in the name it's in and of itself doesn't really align with how our organization is structured, right? So what's the best table to use for the type of structure we have, right? Knowing that it might be manually maintained.
Well, I think you nailed it right there. Where is that organizational data kept? Is it kept in Oracle? Is it kept in PeopleSoft? Pull it from that system into ServiceNow, tie it to the user record that way, whatever those objects are, business unit, department, division, cost center, whatever it may be, you tie it all to the user record. Then you create an incident or whatever on that user, and you automatically have all your organization.
We actually have 2 cost centers for 1 employee because of how our employees are funded. That adds a little bit of complication. We're trying to use cost, the cost center as a key attribute. So, but
of course, it's always going to be complex businesses, right?
Nothing's easy, right?
So John wanted to touch on one of our challenges, and it goes back to both users and the locations, is oftentimes our locations will have multiple functions at them. Retail, data center, it can be a half a dozen things that are given, and usually they're all identified by IDs. And each of those specific types has its own characteristics, region, market, whatever. And then the IDs themselves have to be all related to these locations, so CIs can be assigned to that. So one of our challenges is how do we take multiple IDs, relate them to the location so we can actually relate different types of sites to those locations. And that's we use we use the same thing with users. They come in with a location ID. They don't come in with the physical address.
Okay.
I was going to ask, what are your types of sites?
Retail, data center. We're in telecom, so we may have cell sites and things like that. You may have even a warehouse, sitting in one of those same physical addresses. And we're like, we normalize our data, so I want a single address record, but I have multiple things that connect to that address.
So is there a system of record that keeps like the geographical information for that, and you just reference it with that location ID?
We've done some customization and basically have an ID table sitting out there where I throw IDs and I relate them to location. That way I can, and we also use part of the telecom module, the sites table. That's where all my site specific data will go, and it's related. It basically does a lookup against the ID and gives it the location. That way, if my location changes, the site automatically changes.
Yep. Yeah, I'm wondering if anybody has like an asset table, because I've been talking to a couple of customers about this, that has an address on the assets, but it's not it's not in the ServiceNow location table. Like it's a reference to an external GIS system or an external system that maintains that location data. But so far I've been seeing that everybody's syncing the data, at least on the stuff they're working on. It's syncing it from the external system by put it in the location table. All right, good discussion. Any others? Any other comments on any of the foundational data? It definitely looks like I definitely see a couple follow-on conversations, but I'll group those together. And like reconciling the different sources, I think, is going to be one of the big topics. And how to do that. We do that with our IRE, with our assets, but why not do it with this foundational data as well? I think I could see that being a big topic, being a lot of people have the IRE.
And
I'll
you
just throw. Go ahead,
sorry,
John.
Alan. You mentioned or you brought up the WSD structure earlier,
Yeah.
and you mentioned obviously some people don't have that. Heard rumors that that was going to be integrated into the location structure. Matter saw a comment even in here asking about that. Is that just a rumor? Are we going to integrate that WSD structure? You know, the whole region, space, room, floor. Are we going to integrate that into locations?
Into core, you mean?
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything on that.
Okay.
I can see if I can talk to the product manager and ask them if that's going to be the case. It would be nice to have a part of that base structure, because a lot of people, I've seen a lot of people build this themselves, especially in the medical world. The healthcare seems like a big problem with this one, and I've seen a couple of them build it out themselves.
Doesn't the indoor mapping application that just was released?
Yeah, that and
Address
space
that.
reservations and space moves and things like that. That's all handled in our workplace service delivery. So if you're like moving the HR department from floor 1 in building 1 to floor 2 in building 3, right? It does all the task planning around the moves. But we built this out really quick with an acquisition when we had when COVID was around, because we needed to identify clean spaces, and there was a big need for that.
Yeah, I do recall some webinars where they were speaking to room more in relations to how to track your network equipment in the data closets, and that was something that we've been keeping an eye on. And I know that I've seen some built to help track what was in that data closet, but not so much with what we've got available in ServiceNow at this time.
Okay. Yeah, we have a third party a lot of people use, especially in the medical world, called Nuvolo. And Nuvolo has their own model too for this, right? So there's a couple different versions of it out there for that type of asset location.
And we have both. We've got ServiceNow and Nuvolo on the on our instance, and boy, it's fun. The other thing I wanted to mention relative to groups is the tendency of organizations to name their groups to align with the current organizational model, and sometimes just emulating the organizational hierarchy in acronyms into the group name. So you have these strings of 2 or 3 letter acronyms that become the group name, and the strategy that works much better, but it's really hard to persuade people of this, is to look at something more permanent like services or products, and that if you can align around one of those and engineering development support, and engagement of a particular thing, and divorce it from the org structure, then the inevitable movement to new org structures tends to be less impactful.
Yeah. Excellent. All right, I'll bring this up, and then if we have any more questions, we can raise them afterwards. This is a link that I always put out there for everybody so that you have access to this on the Digital Services Forum. We'll post this video, and then any of the material that we have that's relevant to this topic, we'll post out there on the community so that you have, if a week or two or a month goes by and you want to go back and reference this, you'll be able to find it and get this information to start with. So we'll probably do another series at least another meeting on foundational data. And I think we got a couple good topics for follow-up. Any final words from the panelists?
Nothing more. Great conversation, and thank you everybody who participated and shared their experience. John, I think there could really be some good follow-on sessions with at least moderate deep dives into some of those cases.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the follow-on sessions. This is great.
Yep, absolutely. And then John, we can use the digital services instance to start building out some examples that, people can go and take a look at.
Yep, and there's some in there as well from the workplace service delivery demo data, so you can see the nesting of those locations.
Okay. I also like Ellen's idea on the long list. It looks like those top 4 are really together, and then the bottom 4 is another session that you could kind of tie together.
Yeah, I think that breaking up really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
then a session on value streams with the new models, that makes sense. So we definitely have some follow-ups, but we'll keep that grouped in kind of like a foundational data grouping so that we can look at it all at once if we need to go back and reference it.
Question about 5.0. When is that going to be posted, even as a draft, or is it already?
We're all chomping it to bits. I'm even calling Mark asking for a slide, and he's still giving me one. I got to take screenshots. So,
Fair enough.
there's only 2 people allowed to show it in 3 people, I think, in ServiceNow. So it's still in their
managed to track down a copy, but I'm looking at it and going, okay. When I saw idea coming in,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, we're becoming part of the party. I'm so excited.
Yeah, there's a few screenshots floating around out there, and I think people are using those in presentations right now.
Yeah.
So a plug for Knowledge. It was on display at Knowledge.
Yeah, that's most of the screenshots I see, Shane, are from Knowledge.
Oh,
Like if you go out there and you do CSDM 5.0 and then you do a search on Google and you come up with some Knowledge screenshots, like actual pictures from people's cell phones.
yeah.
They're not great. All right.
In case anybody's listening, I didn't take any pictures.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. I appreciate the conversation today, and we'll circle back around on this stuff for sure and keep it going. Thanks,
Great
everybody.
conversation, John.
Thanks.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.